Ladies and gentlemen, it's your friend Mike Brady from Oceanliner Designs, and we are right in the middle of Titanic Week. This is the first of two very special videos that we have planned for you. This one is very special. So this has been a big week for the Titanic, actually, because there's been a documentary that's come out by National Geographic about the scans that Magellan made back in 2022 that were announced the next year in 2023. These scans are unique. They show Titanic as she is. They're not a model in the conventional sense. They weren't really made by an artist. They're not an interpretation. It's the real deal. And in a very clever play by Magellan, they've made them available to the public in vROV pilot. This is a virtual experience. It's a deep sea exploration portal, and that gives you the opportunity to fire up the program and have a look around the wreck as it actually is, which is, for people like us, pretty exciting. So this is going to be a very interesting one because they've given us early access to the stern section. A couple months ago, they released the bow. It's pretty remarkable stuff, and we had a good look around. But the stern has always been the thing that real, Titanic buffs and nerds like us are fascinated by, because it's really underrepresented. It's not so much in documentaries as much, and there's pretty good reason for that, because it was so badly destroyed during the sinking, as we should soon see. So let's get straight into it and have a look around. So here we are descending with the stern up ahead. I set the visuals to make it so it's as clear as possible so we can really have a look at what's going on down here. The stern section was subjected to, the highest amount of destruction during the sinking, and straight away you can tell. Oh boy. So coming up on it, we're actually approaching the stern from astern. So really we're looking at the very, very back of the Titanic right now. And if you're kind of having a hard time figuring out what it is that you're looking at, I don't blame you, because she's almost unrecognizable. So let me help you orient yourself a little bit. This is the fantail of the ship, the counter stern. It's pretty recognizable still, because it still has that iconic curve to it. Back when Robert Ballard was exploring the ship good and proper, in 1986, after he discovered it the year earlier, he positioned his submersible right under here to get a good look at one of the propellers, but was a little bit disturbed by the overhang of the counter. And you can really see why, because the counter stern hangs right out like that. It's absolutely enormous. What's great about vROV Pilot is that it gives you a real sense of the scale of this ship. It is absolutely enormous. The full resolution scans provide some pretty crazy detail. The experienced vROV Pilot has had to tone that down a little bit because it would be impossible to run. Hey guys, it's me from the future as I'm editing this video. Just on the topic of the resolution. Yes, it's not the 100% resolution of the scans, but I just caught this in editing. This is just off the ship's starboard side. Check this out. The scan resolution is so good that I just got caught up looking at all these little bits of debris on the seafloor. You can see tiles, the red and white tiles from the ship's third class. And directly in front of me, it looks like one of the big wash basins or a toilet basin or a sink or something like that. Big porcelain basin right there, you can see it. The resolution of the scans is still pretty amazing. So you can just see amazing things. Because the stern section was so heavily destroyed, in a way, it's deposited everything that was inside and would otherwise be entombed out, blown it all out for us to explore. Like, that looks like a one of the windows from, I think it was either the lounge or the smoking room had windows like that. Amazing stuff. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. So, although it's not the 100% scan quality that Magellan captured, it's, I think, only about 10%, you still get, like, amazing resolution. Like, look at all this stuff. Pipes, valves, steam pipes from heaters and pumps, tanks and things, all kinds of stuff down here. It is amazing. Anyway, back to the video. In the full resolution scans that Magellan's compiled, we should be able to make out Titanic's nameplate here. Titanic, Port of Registry, Liverpool, still etched into the steel just below it. You can see the very top of the ship's rudder right here. Wow. To get up close and personal with the ship's stern like this is remarkable, because nothing like this has ever been done. That is crazy. It's funny, Titanic's stern is buried into the silt you know, the sea floor, not a huge amount deeper than she would have sat in the water, but the propellers over here have been bent way, way up. It seems like the stern hit the ocean floor with such violence that those propellers were bent up. You know, they were on wings that, you know, jutted out of the hull, and they were slammed upwards by the sheer force of the impact. We'll go along Titanic's starboard side, and this is kind of where things start to get a little bit chaotic. Now, it's been known for a very long time that Titanic's stern is in a very bad way. But look at that. I mean, you really can't even tell, in some ways, what it is you're looking at. It's going to take a little bit of time to process everything that we're seeing here. This is an unbelievable amount of carnage. Jeez. So we'll do a bigger in-depth analysis of the stern section, maybe with a special guest. But this is just a flyover. This is early access. This is going to be released in the next few days, folks. So we'll do some proper analyses on the channel and show you what it is that you're looking at. But you can see very clearly here that the aftermost deck, the poop deck, has been peeled back over onto itself. So what you're seeing here are the ribs. These are the you know, the beams that would have connected the ship's frames on the side of the ship and given the deck its rigidity. So this directly below us, this is such a mess. We'll touch on all that in a minute. But this is, you know, the deck has been peeled back over. And then the actual surface of the stern deck, the poop deck, is over here. Anywhere there's these little round things. So these are called fairleads, the rollers here that would have allowed the ship to dock. You could run your lines through those things and connect them to one of the capstans. There's actually a big stern capstan right there. And it's very, very similar, if not identical, to the ones on the bow. And this is the exact spot where, you know, there were dozens of people potentially clinging onto the stern right at the end, slipped beneath the waves right here. And yeah, it's pretty eerie seeing this. There's all kinds of debris that's kind of just fallen onto the stern though. So it's more like a plane crash. You know, the stern section blew apart as it was coming down. And so there's things that have landed where they shouldn't be. There are some little boxes here, you know. These are, they're identified recently by one of the Titanic Honor and Glory team members as furnaces from the ship's galley section. So they would have sat, you know, hundreds of feet further forward, and they've just kind of rained down after Titanic broke up and ended up here right on the fantail where they shouldn't be. So getting this kind of view of the stern is so invaluable. You know, for model makers, for researchers, if you're interested in the Titanic at all, I think you're going to lose a lot of time in vROV Pilot. I can't get over how the sea deck here just falls away at the well deck. It's just the whole thing has collapsed and come down. You know, Titanic's stern section was like eight or so stories tall originally, and now it's down to about the height of the engines. 2 and a bit stories tall, say. Shocking amounts of damage. The port side here is arguably in worse shape, and it might be a little bit difficult to tell what you're looking at. We will do, like I said, a more in-depth kind of analysis of what it is that we're actually seeing. So this is the plating for the sea deck, the well deck. The side of the ship has splayed out like that. So everything has been blown out from when she hit the sea floor. I cannot imagine something this big hitting the sea floor with that much force. That is almost unthinkable. Then, up here, we've got a few really interesting things going on. So we've got directly below our ROV, I'll try and put the pointer on it, you can just see the physics is so cool with the line going all over the place like that. That's very clever. You can see windows here from the after end of the second class stairs that were on A deck down to B deck, and the remains of the main mast, which has collapsed onto its side. over onto the ship's port side. So as the ship was sinking, it's just gone bang and, you know, fallen off. The other really iconic kind of parts of the stern that you can see to really help orient yourself include the second class entrance over here. So this was the deck house, I suppose, that enabled the second class passengers to get up and down all the way up to the boat deck. You kind of can't really tell where the boat deck ends and A deck begins and B deck begins and C deck. You know, they've all just pancaked on top of each other. And so, you know, all the rooms and all the spaces inside are effectively gone. So Titanic's stern section, because it was so heavily damaged, is being eaten away at a faster rate. So, you know, even since she was found, you know, 40 odd years ago, there have been more and more things collapsing, you know, coming apart. We now get a good look into the elevator housing, which sat on top of the second class stairs. There was a lift, and it went, you know, up and down for those passengers, so they didn't have to take all those stairs. And so now we can actually have a peek inside the roof and see the machinery that would have operated that lift. The lift is somewhere in there, you know, entombed in the stern section, probably crushed by the looks of it. Then we've got over here one of the cranes, the starboard side crane from A deck that's still attached. And almost all the other cranes are gone. This one is just clinging on, although, by the looks of it... Oh yeah, so it's got its arm, the boom is swung out to starboard there. You can see that that arm is just sitting there. Wow, this is pretty crazy, not going to lie. There's a lot here that I want to talk about. So little time. I'm trying to get this done before we run out of time in the mission. There's like 23 odd minutes left, so I'll see what we can get through. This little device here has been the subject of some discussion because of the upcoming documentary. It was identified as a piece of the ship's machinery, the engines that essentially detached. It's one of those other pieces of debris that's just kind of like landed on the stern section. Park Stevenson, the researcher and the engineer, he goes into this in some detail in the documentary, so keep an eye out for that. That will be pretty interesting. Thanks to Magellan scans, we get to see this stuff in high detail, high enough to see that you can actually see that the little valve there is open, not shut. You can see it just sitting in there where it's still open. Whether that was done during the ship's operation or during the sinking from the hydrodynamic forces, you know, the water column remains to be seen, but I'm sure Parks will go into that in detail in the doc. So zooming along the port side of the ship, you really get a sense for how badly destroyed this is. And what's interesting here is that it seems that at the very stern of the ship near sea deck, the side of the hull plating is separated from the top and sagged out. But here, it's kind of gone the other way. You can see that it's actually blown, the bottom has blown out of it. It's shocking. And it's not just the shell plating, you know, the skin of the ship that's come out. It's actually taken all of the frames with it. You can see the frames are still attached to this shell plating. So that's the ship's very skeleton. The side of the ship has just come out of it. So no wonder it's collapsed, because all of these frames that were actually, you know, holding it together have just been blown out of it as you hit the ocean floor. I almost don't have words for this. This is shockingly bad. Wow. That's an interesting little thing. I think that this is the condenser discharge outlet. So this would have basically sat just about at the waterline on the ship's port side. There was another one on the other side as well, and the water that had been used to turn the ship's steam back into boiler feed water and circulated through the ship. It was drawn in from big inlets under the hull, and then, you know, circulated through pipes, cooled the steam, turned it back into water, and then the condenser discharge, the seawater, was just spat back out over the side through this port. It's interesting. Again, it's one of those little things that helps orient where we are, because that should be, you know, I guess higher up, like the stern should be sitting higher up, and that should be higher up on the hull, but it's just been, you know, pancaked out as someone dropped a wedding cake or something. It's just unreal. The engines will be back here, just behind us, but I do want to go and have a quick look. This is my first time playing this, so I'm kind of reacting in real time and sort of almost talking to myself a little bit, because there's a lot to unpack. There's, you know, all this stuff, you know, piping and bits of machinery and things lying out there. You know, I'm sure researchers and that will use vROV Pilot to identify and figure out exactly what happened. And, you know, there's a lot that needs to be kind of explained still about Titanic. You know, these are the ship's cargo handling cranes, and they were kept in these cylindrical bases which had the electric machinery in them. And what's really, really interesting is that they've all been ripped off, and quite a few of them have just been spat out and dropped here off the ship's port side, which is quite unusual. You know, I mean, did this happen really high up in the water column and they just got deposited down here? Did it happen that, you know, Titanic struck the sea floor, the seabed in such a way that these were torn off at that moment? You know, this is the kind of stuff that really needs to be analyzed. It will give us a better idea of exactly what happened after she left the surface. If we have a look down here, yeah, we can see the machinery for the for actually operating the crane. And I think some of this machinery is still stuck on the well deck. I think I saw a wheel or like a big gear from one of the cranes a little earlier. You can see here the crane here still actually has its boom arm, but it's bent up like that quite unnaturally. And then this crane over here has lost its base and its boom arm, so it's just the, you know, the machinery and the top, the upper of the crane. It's just hard to, you know, really fathom what happened here. It's unreal. Here's another crane with some, it looks like a bulkhead or some shell plating next to it, and this has just been twisted and broken off. Unreal. We've seen some of this stuff before in photographs and scans and, you know, footage. Ken Marshall's paintings are the things that have given us the best overall view of the stern in the past. You know, and when Ken painted the stern back in the 80s, you know, it hadn't collapsed as much as this. You know, there were still little parts of B deck and A deck that you could make out, but that's all changed because this is in much, much worse condition than the bow. You can see the mast there. You see that big, it looks like a big oil pipe snaking its way off to the side. That's really interesting. Wow. It's very interesting that even stayed attached. You know, the mast actually didn't just end at the deck. It went down a couple of decks below. I think it terminated at B deck, I think. So it's obviously, you know, like anchored to the inside of the ship. We're going to go and have a look in here now at the engines. That's the only thing about ROVs, they're not speed demons. If you're an ROV pilot, you have to have the patience of a saint in the hands of a surgeon. I'll try and zoom down under here. Gee, you don't want to get snagged on that. Oof. It's crazy, you know, that this stuff actually exists. You know, this is what it really looks like down there. This isn't someone's, you know, interpretation or imagination. This is a big, big piece of deck plating that's just kind of been draped over the engines here. Wow. Yeah, it's kind of almost hard to think of what to say in a way, because it's moving to see the ship represented like this. These are the main engines. They were once contained within the hull, you know, in a compartment, and the hull would have gone all the way up there. But now all that's left is this kind of collapsed, you know, shell where these things have just had all this steel come down on top of them. So now they're exposed, and you can actually see, that one's a little harder to make out, but if I'll put the pointer on it, you can see here there's a, the crankshaft is still there, but you can actually see where the rest of the engine was snapped off. The forwardmost cylinders from the port and starboard engine just broke off when the ship, presumably when the ship broke apart. And so they separated quite quite neatly by the looks of it. You can see the double bottom down here. To give you some perspective, the double bottom of the Titanic was about 6 feet tall. So if we try and position ourselves here, that's the height of a tall person right there, which means that there is a lot of engine and then a lot of ship on top of that. And it's all gone. It's all been broken up. Sorry, getting a little choked up, I guess, but wow. So, you know, I mean, this was the inside of a room. This was a compartment. This was the engine room. And now it's just exposed to the ocean floor. It's unreal seeing this. You can actually just make out some of the piston rods and the cranks and things in there. The engine room was full of pumps and all kinds of equipment. Presumably they're all still attached. I think, let me get my glasses. What is that? Wow. Yeah, I can't quite tell. You can actually see some of the manhole covers for access to some of the, you know, the tanks in the double bottom and things like that. I can't quite tell. Oh yeah, look, these are all pumps and things. You can actually see here, this one's still got some of the pipes attached to it. You can see some of the piping there. You know, the boilers and the engines relied on tons of machinery and pumps themselves to keep running. And it looks like there's still a lot of that in there. It's unreal. You can see those triangular, I'm trying to get my pointer on them, those triangular, I'll scan one. Those triangular supports are actually exactly where the you know, the floors of the keel turned with the bilge and then turned into the side of the ship. So, you know, Titanic's side would have come out and gone up here, and it's all gone. Like, it's all been blasted out. Like, look at this. Look at, I mean, this is a whole section of Titanic's side that's just been ripped off, just blown out and spat, you know, 100 feet away. I mean, it's just such a massive amount of damage. It's really incredible. Titanic had, oh wow. Sorry, I'm taking this all in. There's the condenser discharge by the looks of it. Wow, that's the condenser discharge for the starboard side of the ship. Now this is the discharge outlet that caused some trouble because 2 lifeboats were being lowered around about the same time, and the steady stream of water coming out of that discharge port right there almost flooded one and pushed it underneath the path of the other boat that was coming down on top of it, boat 15. But it's interesting because it was also roughly the fulcrum of Titanic's sinking. It was about the center point, you know, of where it was sinking, because all throughout it stayed roughly above the waterline until the end. Directly beneath it, you can see these 2 big rectangular holes. This one has just been shredded, but this one still has a grill over it. So you remember I was talking about the condenser. In order to turn the steam back into water, it needed to pull water in. And so it had these big injection ports that drew seawater in. Now these were, you know, down on the hull, but they weren't like under the ship. You know, they were about, you know, in the red part of the hull, in the anti-foul. But this whole section of the ship's side has just been blasted out and pancaked over, and it is not where it should be at all. Like, none of this should be here. There's so much that you'll be able to take from this to, you know, to learn about the ship and what happened to it. This is eerie. You know, this is inside the ship. So these, you actually see the portholes with their deadlights still attached to them. There seems to be some timber or something still attached to these frames. Here you can see timbers. We'll have to check the deck plans and see exactly where this is. It could be from like an insulated area, although I mean this is a little higher up, so this is probably like, gee, I don't know, D deck? Yeah, this is what's going to occupy me for like the next few weeks. Like trying to figure out what it is that we're seeing. Yeah, big sections of condenser, all kinds of stuff down here. Unfortunately, the condenser itself in the turbine room is just, it's like they've just been buried by tons of steel, just entombed forever. Unbelievable. So now, coming back around on the port side again, if I look confused or horrified, it's because I am both of those things. You know, there are just little things that you identify every now and then, like you just see sticking out here from underneath this big piece of shell plating that's been, is it shell or deck? Looks like deck plating maybe, that's been ripped off. The bottom of a lifeboat davit, so that's one of the double-acting Welland quadrant davits that's just been buried by this deck. In fact, that might even be that the davit was mounted to this deck, which would mean that that's possibly a section of boat deck that's been ripped off. Here we can see what look like the big gangway doors that led into sea deck, into the second class covered promenade, and you can actually see the big windows. And one of my favorite features of the stern here that is still identifiable is this, because it's such an identifiable thing that unlike everything else aft of the well deck, you know, like from there down to here, everything's been flattened and torn apart, except for this. This still kind of has the shape that it had back in 1912. So you can make out where the doors are. You can even make out, if we go back here, where it curves right here. You can see how it drops down and curves like that. And that would have been where it goes into the well deck. You can see that very distinctive sweep, that curving shape. And that's kept its shape, even though the bulwark and the rest of the well deck have been torn away like paper, you know, like wet paper. It's just been torn apart. The windows are there. So this is the back end of B deck on top and C deck below it. And we can just peek inside the second class covered promenade. And interestingly, though, there would have been a bulkhead here. There was a big wall that would have stopped people from third class getting into second class and vice versa. That's just gone. That's all been ripped out of it. It's pretty amazing. This is the biggest section of intact deck still on the stern. And you can actually make out a few more things. You can make out one of the smaller cargo hatches here. Now that sat either side of the mast. And you can see the remains of the second class deck house there, just behind it. But everything above it has just come down. It's pretty shocking, honestly. There's a lot to unpack here. So yeah, we're gonna need to do a lot more videos to cover this, because there is so much here to look at, so much to unpack. And yeah, Magellan have done a pretty spectacular job. It's great that there'll be a documentary using Magellan scans being analysed by, you know, Parks and others. I think Stephen Payne, who's a friend of the channel, he'll be in that documentary as well. But getting the opportunity as well to then fly around it for yourself and look and take your time and come across things like this. You know, look, that's a big electric fan. You can see there the motor and the fan unit. And these were positioned to like ventilate, you know, the third class spaces on the ship. Right at the stern section. And that one's still there. The other one, not so much. I will lose a lot of time exploring this, as I'm sure a lot of you will as well. So I'm going to put the link to Steam in the description of this video, at the top pinned comment as well. The stern section's coming out in the next few days. Go and check it out. You have to get your hands on vROV Pilot. If you're interested in Titanic, you've got a computer, and you want to play it and have an explore, absolutely do it. It's a remarkable experience, and Magellan really have to be you know, commended for putting together what is probably the biggest opportunity for enthusiasts and you know, researchers and really like everybody across that whole like Titanic sphere spectrum, like empowering them to actually get in the ROV pilot seat and have a look at what would otherwise be completely inaccessible. I mean, this is reading 3.8 odd, you know, 1,000 meters at the bottom of the ocean, which is incredible. Like, this is just something that, yeah, like 10-year-old me could only have dreamt of. So again, a huge thank you to Magellan for providing early access to this really remarkable experience. I'll put the link in the description. I'm sure we'll be doing more on the stern section soon. We've got some more very exciting videos lined up for Titanic month. So thank you once again for joining me. As always, stay safe, stay happy, and I'll see you again next time.